concerning the Lord's work, when he begins to do a work, he proves that work. And that's the reason we mentioned that these testimonies was infallible proofs. The Bible said, in the mouth of two or three witnesses, every word will be established. And that's the way God always established anything, was with faithful witnesses. And so the Lord began to do this, and it's about 9 years that the Lord directed us, and not that he doesn't do anything anymore, but this was just some outstanding infallible proofs of the working of the Holy Spirit, according to the way that William Branham had taught that things should be done, and him being a prophet of God, and we began to do things like he had taught, and we got results. And this is, God's no respecter of persons. Every believer gets results when you get in the right channel, if you find your place in the body. And don't try to take somebody else's place, but just be what you are, then God will work. And as I give the testimony previously concerning the time that we was sent, and we had that van that Brother Bob White had furnished, and the thing, motor had went out in it almost completely, and the Lord just undertaken. Because see, when you're in the line of duty, then the Lord is obligated to fulfill his word. I remember we had a brother that has passed away now, but he went with us, Steve Sawyer, and I had known him for years. He had been in church when I pastored at Hardy, and he was a real good piano player, and he was gone away from us a long time, and he come back and joined himself to us just at the right time to go with us to play the piano. And one time he told me, he said he had went to the doctor, and the doctor had set him up appointment for having a knee operation and had to replace some things in his knees. And he told me he had an appointment, and I said, how can you do that? I said, I'm scheduled to go with the tent. He said, I don't know, but I've got an appointment. Well, just before that we was to go, one night the Holy Spirit moved upon a sister, and she went to him and told him to get up from the piano and go up there and have me to pray for him. And I had a piece of Brother Branham's clothes, a sock, that I told Brother Billy Paul that I'd like to have something of Brother Branham's, because he had given me a rock one time, and I'd put it on my finger when I got my finger pulled off, and doctors was wanting to cut the end of my finger off because there wasn't nothing holding but the hide up on top. The finger went straight up in the air and at the joint, and time we got over there, my brother took me to the hospital. Well, my finger had turned real black, and they was going to cut it off and cut that bone off, and I didn't want them to do it, and I told him I didn't want my finger cut off, just try to sew it back on. So he went and got another doctor's opinion, and he went and got another doctor's opinion, and it was my third finger on my right hand, and I'd went and got another doctor's opinion, and he said, yeah, we had to cut it off, and I said, no, I don't want my finger cut off. So they went out and told my brother John, and he said, well, if he ain't got no better sense than that, and he said that if he loses his whole finger and hand, that's up to him. Well, anyway, they tacked it back on, and so it looked like it's going to rot off, but we prayed, and I'd taken that rock, and I'd put it on this big hole down in there, and it was terrible looking, and I just put that rock on that finger and claimed that finger in the name of the Lord. And my finger now is just as good as the rest of them. It's got a little bit of a crook in it, but it got real cold for years. And but then it finally, all the feeling come back in it, and it's just as good as the next one. Well, that's just the working of the Holy Spirit according to the Word of God. And so Brother Steve Sawyer, the Spirit of the Lord went to him, while he was at the piano, and told him to come up there and have me to lay the clothes, sock on him. And so he got up, and he had a walker. He had been using the walker for a good while, and he got up and tried to start walking, and just barely could make it with that walker because the Spirit of the Lord got on him. And when he got up there, I laid that piece of clothes on him and prayed. Now, of course, everybody was praying, but we just did what the Lord said. And he began to jump and praise God, and just kept a-jumping and everything. And a brother here in church, Brother Paul D. Weber, that had a good friend of his that played the fiddle for us and so forth, violin. And he got him and took him to town and had him running and jumping, and it was just all kind of things. So he went back to the doctor, and I told him, I said, we're going back to the doctor. And the doctor told him, said, I'll sign an affidavit, a miracle has happened in your knees. Said, there's ligaments things here that wasn't here before. And so he went with us with the tent. So that's the way God just done all kind of miracles of things, supernatural things that he did, because we was in the line of duty. And so when the Lord begins to send us with the tent, even before he sent us with the tent, he told me many things that he would do, and that he did it. And so we, from getting the PA system and from one thing to another continually, he was just leading by the Holy Spirit. And he had told a brother that was working with me, he told him, Brother Curtis Gibson, he told him to quit his job, and he had blessed the business. And so Brother Curtis would go to the library and get things in the library for me. I remember one time he told him to go to the library, and he said, there's a book in the library. And they said, and told what the author's name was, LeBlanc, and said, go down there and get this book, and he wanted him to bring it for me to read. Well, he went down there to the library and looked all in the library and got on the thing, and he come back and he said, well, the book is not down there in the library. And so I said, well, let's just pray. See, God don't make no mistakes. So we went to praying, and the Spirit of the Lord moved upon one of the vessels and said, you go back to the library, and said, the book is in the library, and said, how you will know it, there'll be a family tree in it. So he went back down there and went to the lady that was in charge, and he said, you've got a book in here, and the author's name is LeBlanc, and I can't find it. She said, well, she'd look on the big computer, and she searched on the computer and so forth, and she said, yes, there is one. And she went and got the book, and when they opened it up, the author of the book, he had put his family tree in this, because he had wrote the book, and he had his family tree in it, showing that he went back to those, the name of the book was The Miracle of the Cadence. And it showed how that, and the Lord told me there's roots in it, and told me that there's many things in it that typed out the United States and what was coming upon the people. And so he, when they opened the book up, the family tree had come loose. The book was an older book, and the family tree had come loose and from where it was kind of glued in there, and it fell right out on the floor. So I have the book, and I checked that book out, and then a sister in the church had bought me one of them later. But it told all the things that England did to those people that went up there, and it was up at St. John and up in Nova Scotia and up in there, and how that they did. And there was 42, I believe it was, 42, 43 families that come out of there. And there was, Martin was in was one of the men that come out of there by the name of Pierre Martin, and he planted trees up in there. He is the first one who ever brought the apples up into Nova Scotia and St. John. And so the Lord was continually just doing things like this all the time. And he would have him to go get the flyers that would type out what was going on where we was going, and we'd go from one place to another. And we went to Story, Arkansas over here, went to Mena, and that's where I met Brother Silas Bashirs, and I didn't even know him. And the Lord told me that he would even preach with me in the tent. And come to find out, he had been in Brother Branham's meetings and so forth and so on. And he sent us the story, and he said there'll be a story come out of Story. And we went over to that little town, Brother Silas did, and asked him about putting the tent over there up on their land. And she says, I'll talk to my husband. She said, you're not a cult, are you? He said, no, we just go around and work with all denominations. Anybody want to come out and help out? She said, well, y'all can come back, and said, y'all can have it. She said, and I want to give you a donation of $300. She said, and don't tell nobody we did it. And so we put the tent up there, and she told me that her husband had been in the house for, I believe she said, a couple of years, hadn't hardly been out of the house, was real bad sick. And so she'd like for us to pray for him. Well, the Lord told me how many nights that I was to stay at each place that we'd go. And so therefore, I'd planned on staying through Sunday, according to the way I understood what I was supposed to do. And she told me, I asked her for her husband. She come over there and asked us, we'd remember her husband in prayer. I said, why don't you bring him over to the tent? Now, she was having to work, and she never got to come to the tent meeting. And so somebody asked her, said, are you having a tent meeting? And she said, no, God is. And so she didn't get to come to the services. And so then the Lord spoke to me and told me to go one extra night. I really didn't want to go an extra night. There didn't seem to be too much enthusiasm for the meeting. And of course, I had about 50 people that was going with me. And they shut down a lot of times and take vacations. And one time we went 29 days. And some of them stayed the whole trip with me. And so Spirit spoke and told me when we was praying that we was to spend one more night, take another night. And so that night, she come over there, and she said, I'm really glad you had another night, because I hadn't got a chance to come over here. And I had told her we'd come over and prayed for her husband if she wanted to, and she said, and she brought it up that night when she was coming to service. She said, well, can I stand like that person did for their daughter and her son or someone like in the Bible? I said, well, yes, you can. And so she come over there for prayer that night, and the Holy Spirit spoke to her in prophecy and told her that what he was going to do. And her husband got healed, and the Lord healed her husband, and he got up, and he hadn't been out of the house, like I said, in no telling how long. And the Lord healed him, and he went around all over that neighborhood. And Brother Silas seen him up in a restaurant, and he was telling everybody how the Lord healed him. And so God sent us over there, no doubt, for that one person. It's not the amount of people. It's if God sends you, He's going to prove it. I remember one time that the Lord told me to go to Brother Elmer Martin. He's no relation to us, and him and his wife, but my brother baptized them, and they come to the Lord under my brother's ministry way back in 58, I believe 59. That's when I first met them. And then they moved to where we lived, and there's Sister Golden that's still alive now, and her daughter and the family that attends our church. But Brother Elmer's brother, I knew his brother, named Kenny Martin, and Kenny, his younger brother, he used to come to my church some when I was in Wardell, Missouri. Never had accepted the Lord, ever. And so he got 50-some years old, and Brother Elmer said he wanted to go up there and see him, but he wanted us to pray about it because he didn't know if his car would make the trip good, and he just prayed about it. Well, we was praying about it, and the Spirit spoke and said, yes, you are to go. And said, you go with him, and you take your vehicle, and you pay all the expenses. Well, I knew it was the Lord speaking, and so I went. There was 2 different trips I went up there, and one of the trips was in the hot summertime, and I was taking him up there, and he told me to go up there and see Kenny, and tell him that he sent me, and that he was going to save him before he took him. Well, he had never accepted the Lord, and so we went up there, and when we went up there, I just went in, and I said, Kenny, it's about 700 and some miles, and I paid all the gas, all the eats, everything. That's what God told me to do, and so that's what I did, and I was glad to do it. And so therefore, I went in and seen Kenny, and he couldn't hardly breathe, and I said, brother, I said, Kenny, you're in pretty bad condition. He said, yeah, I've smoked and drank all my life, all these years, and he said, that's old rot gut whiskey, and said, I've killed myself. I said, well, Kenny, the Lord told me to come up here and pray for you, and that he's going to save you before he took you. And he just started crying, and he got down and gave his heart to the Lord, and he told everybody that he was ready to go when he passed away. So we come home, and we was having prayer meetings every night at 9 o'clock. And we had prayer meetings in the daytime at 9 and nighttime at 9, sometime 3 o'clock at night. The Lord was having us do a lot of praying, and that's what it takes. You get praying, get people to praying, and God will work. And I'm a witness of that, and that's the reason why that I'm giving these testimonies, the infallible proofs. So we was coming down it wasn't blacktop, this road that come down by my house wasn't blacktop at the time, and I remembered it was one of the driest years that I ever seen, and everything had died. All the trees was trying to die, and all the grass had died, and the dust was real bad. And it was about 9 o'clock at night, and I said, well, let's have prayer. I said, it's 9 o'clock. And we had just got back in the vicinity of Hot Springs here in Arkansas. And we started praying. The Holy Spirit moved upon one of the person that was in the car, and it said, do not go to your house. Said, you go to your son-in-law's, Jack Dorlock, and go to his house. He lived back this side of me, towards the highway. My house was past his. And said, you go to your son-in-law's house, and said, I was praying at that time, and I told the Lord, I said, Lord, I know it's not no big thing for you to send the rain. And I said, we are needing the rain so bad. And that's when he started speaking out, and through Teresa, and said, I'm God. I'll send the rain. You go there and tell Jack I'm fixing to send the rain. So I went by Jack's, and they hadn't started praying. It's about 15-20 after, and they said, well, we're just getting ready to pray, Jack and his family. And I said, well, the Lord told me to come by, and so he's going to send the rain. So we started praying, and the Spirit spoke and said, now, do not say that it will come the first morning, but the rain will come at daybreak. As Jacob wrestled with the angel, so your blessings will come at daybreak. Said, you'll hear the thunder, and said the rain will be falling in. So we was excited because it was in the paper. We did have the paper. I don't know if somebody has it now, but it said, no rain in sight. Burn bands on and no rain in sight. Well, we went to church, the little church we had over there that morning, and the Spirit spoke that day over there and said, I'm God. I can send the rain natural and spiritual. But he didn't say no more about it. And one of the brothers said to me, it sounded to me like the Lord's fixing to send the rain. I said, well, I know something, but I'm just not going to tell you. I never would tell prophecy before it happened because you can interfere with God by doing them kind of things. So he didn't tell me to tell it, so that's all I said. So anyway, the next morning was Sunday morning, and that night we went to bed and got up, woke up the next morning, and I'd heard a thunder, and it was so loud. Now, I've heard thunders a lot of times, and it didn't rain, and you'd think it's going to rain, bust thunders, lightnings, but when this thunder went off, everybody that I talked to said, "Did you ever hear a thunder that was loud like that thunder?" Everybody I talked to woke them up, and it just thundered out real loud, and he had spoke to me and told me that he'd give me a sign earlier with me and this deacon that was in my church, Brother Curtis Gibson, and I don't know what that sign was, if it wasn't this. A light come on in my front room. I had a pole lamp hanging down with 5 lights on it, I believe. But anyway, that light come on in my front room when that thunder went off, and and it went on in Curtis Gibson's house at the same time. And anyway, I said to Teresa, I said, there's a light on. I said, that must be something outside there, because we had a night light that would come on, motion. And she said, no, that's not on, because I'd turned it off. I said, well, there's somebody in our house then. And I got up and walked in the front room, and it just felt real weird to me, and this light hanging on. And so I walked over and jerked the door open, and the rain was coming. And it was coming. So at that time, the rain come too. And it rained so hard that water run, and it's not real steep between mine and Jack's house, but I seen water going out through there. And it didn't rain all over too much, but it did rain in different areas. And it come on the radio, we don't know where this blessed rain come from. Said, but the burn ban's still on. Well, they didn't have to keep the burn ban on, because it rained ever a little bit for quite a few days until everything turned back green again. So that's Jesus Christ, the same yesterday, today, and forever. So after the Lord begins to send us different towns, and I will tell later on how many different places He sent us to, but He sent us to different towns, and He told me that He had put me in a lot of the believers' back door. And so a lot of judgment would follow the tent. And I remember we went to different places. We went to one place, and they made light of us being there. Even the cop said, we don't need no preaching over here. And it was over here at Magnolia, I believe it was. And I told him, I spoke the last night, and I said, well, the Spirit of the Lord told me that the attitude that people had towards what He was doing would determine different things that would happen. And so I said, judgment will follow this meeting. And we left there, and there's so much water come in there within a week or two. It rained so hard that it put water over the roads. It put water about 4 feet deep where we had the tent. And there's some drowned over there. And water went in Walmart. It was so deep over there. And one time He sent me to also up at another town, and He spoke to me a lot about that town. And we couldn't hardly find no place to put the tent up. And I remember we was out in Colorado, and a brother went over there to try to find a place to put the tent up, and it was over here at Heber Springs, and I believe the name of the town it was. And we went over there and trying to find a place to put the tent up, and I was gone to Colorado. And he had spoke to me before and told me to never put out a flyer until I definitely had a place to put the tent. But me going to leave, I'd done something I wasn't supposed to do. I told the brother to go ahead and fix the flyers, but just leave that spot blank of the dates and exactly where the location was going to be. Well, I got out in Colorado, and he had spoke to me and told me to get an insurance because I was going to need it. And I tried to get some insurance, and it was so high that I just avoided the insurance. And at the time, and we went to a few different places with the tent, we didn't have no insurance. Well, when they got over there, nobody wouldn't let them have it because they had to have insurance because somebody had sued someone with one of the fireworks tents or something, or a carnival or something, and something had happened, and nobody over there would let us have a place to put the tent. And Brother Curtis had called me and told me I better come on home, that they'd been over there trying to find a place to put this tent up and couldn't find it, and I better come on home. Well, we was praying, and the Spirit of the Lord spoke and said, do not go home now. Said, do not go home. And I was supposed to put the tent up now on a Monday. And it said, do not go home until Thursday, go home. And we got there late, and it said, and you watch what I do. Said, I'm going to show them why they need a pastor, and I'm going to show you why you need me. So he was teaching me for something that I didn't do, just like he told me to do. And I thought we couldn't get no insurance, but they was asking us, I think, $1,300 to have one meeting, and it was just outrageous what they asked us. And Curtis had called Little Rock and called all kind of places. Well, we got in Thursday night, and I was praying, and I went over and picked up a telephone book, and there was a man's insurance company just stood out to me. And I didn't know why, but I called him up. And we had a little insurance on the church, not much, and because we had a loan on it. And he said, what you need to do is to get a policy with your church. And I said, well, we tried that, and they won't do it. He said, well, let me go out there and look at that church, and I'll see what I can do. So he didn't call me back. And here it was Friday evening, and now I'm supposed to go over there, that we're going to take this tent over there on Sunday evening and start a service Monday night. So that night, he hadn't called me back that evening. So I called Brother Curtis Gibson, and I said, I want you to get ready to go with me. And me and the wife, we're going over there. He said, what are you going to do for insurance policy? I said, oh, I'll have an insurance policy, because the Lord told me that he's seen me going over there with policy in my hand. So I told him to be over there, and we was going to be down to his office by 9 o'clock when he opened up, because we was going to have to drive about 125 miles, I believe, where we was going to. And he said, you're going to just take off over? I said, yeah, because the Lord told me that I'd have a policy in my hand. So I called up the insurance company, and we was on our way down there, and right at 9, and he said, well, come by here, he said, this morning. And I said, well, I'm on my way to your office right now. He said, well, I haven't got anything wrote up. I said, well, I'm heading to your office. Well, when I got over there, he put a policy for $500 and some on the church and also the tent for a year. And it was just unheard of. And we went on over there, and there was a man that told Mr. Gibson, said, if you got an insurance policy, I will let you put it up. My lawyer told me not to do it, but if you got an insurance policy, I will let you put it up if you can't find none nowhere else. And so we went over there and we prayed, and there was 2 spots he had picked out, and both of them men had told him the same. The other one had told me he knew him. He had a chain of stores up in Hardy and different places, and he knew him, and he said he would do it if we had an insurance policy, but he wouldn't do it either unless we had, I believe his name was Clay. But we went over there and we prayed, and the Spirit spoke and said in prophecy, and said, this is the place to put the tent. But you go back to the other man, said, because it'll, and on that day, what his decision is will determine, I believe the words it said, it'll determine his destination. So we went back over to the man that he had a big business, and we went over there and went in, and he said, he come in there and we sat down on a round table. He said, well, what did you find out? And so Curtis presented him our insurance policy. And he said, well, I told you I would do it, and I will do it. And I spoke up and told him, I said, sir, I don't believe we're going to have to use your place, but we wanted to come over here just in case anything fell through on the other place. And he looked real relieved. He said, well, he said, I hope that you get the other place, because my lawyer has advised me against this, but I'm going to do it. And so the Lord spoke to me about what Brother Brown talked about, that there'd be many people that would be given life because it's good to God's people, the bride. And so therefore, these things, many times, people's attitude, God gives people a chance to do something good for his people. I remember when we was going out, one time Brother David Jackson, he was up in Illinois, and he knew where there's a big factory there, and they sold dented cans of canned goods. And David went over and talked to him, and he asked him about buying a few cases of them different vegetables and cans and fruits and stuff. And this man said, no, we don't sell them to individuals like that, bent cans and so forth, no more, or to individuals. And he said, but what are y'all doing? And he told him we was going with the tent, different places. He said, back your truck over there, and I'll call them, and said, we'll just give you a bunch of cans. And I forget how much many did he give us, great big gallon cans and little cans, and he gave us cases. When we got done with the tent, we still had cases. So see, God knows how to take care of us, and God knows how to look after us, and many healings taking place, many outstanding healings taking place. I remember one time, and I had a small tent. A lot of people thought I was trying to copy Brother Branham's visions, but there was no truth in that. The Spirit of the Lord told me to get a smaller tent because he said it's not a show, and so many times I had a smaller tent, about a 12 by 20 or something like that, prayer tent where people go in and pray, and we would take many people in that tent to pray for many times. And I had 2 people that the Lord was using really extraordinary in prophecy. And so I would take them in the tent, and they would sit down. They used to stand up at first, but then they got so tired. I just have them sit down, and they sit with their heads bowed. And I tell people when they're coming into the tent, I say, don't make no racket, where they will know whether that it's a man or woman. I said that way it will build your faith if it speaks to you. So sometime it didn't speak. They'd come in, I'd just stand up a little bit, And then if it didn't speak right off, we'd just pray for him, and I'd let him pass on through. I remember, but a lot of times he would speak to him. And I remember one time we was up in Illinois, Rochelle, Illinois, and that's the first place that me and my brother ever went out with the tent from up there. And we had bought a tent up there, and in fact, I've told a testimony before, but we was working for the Nash place, trying to sell cars. Wasn't doing too good a job of it. But anyway, when we decided to have a meeting up there, and we had a little mission up there that me and my sister had rented a building at the Oddfellows Hall, and we was having a meeting there, and that's about 20 miles from Rockford where we live. And so we was up there having a meeting in this Oddfellows Hall, and so we told them that we'd like to find a place to put the tent. We had a small tent. Me and John had a 20 by 30 tent that we had, and we'd had it up down in Arkansas once, and I think or twice, but anyway, it's this small tent. Well, we was looking for a place to put that tent up, and one night my brother was there, and he was preaching that night, and we told that we was looking for a place, and there's a man that used to come to that little mission we was having, and he had invited his sister, and his sister's name was Ralph Quest's wife, and Ralph Quest was one of the big sponsors of Oral Roberts. In fact, they put out a book, and his story's in that book, and it's God's Way to Success and Happiness, I believe it was. And Ralph Quest was one of the 10 top sponsors of Oral Roberts, and it's got quite a story in there, and it'd be really good for you to read. It tells about how that he started out and didn't have no money and at all, and got saved and went to Oral Roberts meeting and give quite a large sum of money when he went. But he tells his story. But his wife was there, and she had stomach trouble real bad and had it for years, and had different ones praying for him, even having Brother Roberts pray for her, but she didn't get healed. See, God's healing a lot of times is things happens for a time, and it wasn't God's will to heal her at that time, but it was his will to heal her at our service, because when we prayed for her and the Lord healed her, she went home and told her husband, and the next service he was there, and Ralph was there, and he owned a great big lumber yard and cement place in town, and he said, I got a place you can put that tent. When we told him, and he said, you can put it in my backyard. And he said, I'll furnish all the lumber for a rostrum, and I'll furnish the boards for the seats and blocks. And well, we had this little old 20 by 30 tent, and John said, my brother said, man, we need a bigger tent than that. I almost embarrassed to put that up on there. So anyway, I talked to Ralph Callahan up there, and he told me, he said, there's a place up here below at Wisconsin, he said, where they put up a big tent every year. He said, why don't you go to them and see if maybe you can rent it. So me and my sister went up there to see them, and this was a big army tent. It had chains and cables, and it was so heavy to put up, but it was a 50 by 80, and had great big steel posts, and you 3 or 4 people that tucked even rolls. And anyway, I asked them about renting it, and they said, we'll rent it to you for $150 for a week, or we'll sell it to you for $150. So we wanted to get a bigger one, and there's a bunch of churches going together. And I said, well, I don't have no $150, but we got $35. And I said, we'll give you that $35, and time the meeting's over, we'll pay the rest of it off. Now, we never, ever pulled for no offerings. We just passed the offering plate, and that's all we done. And so anyway, Ralph Quest told me, he said, the only thing I want to do is lift the offering. I said, well, now, we don't want you pulling for no offering. He said, no, but I just want to lift the offering. I said, all right. So every night he'd put a 20 in. And so when we got done, the Lord done some great healings there in Rochelle. And I remember some different testimonies. One woman, she'd been on sugar so bad she'd pass out and everything. The Lord healed her. And another girl had a spirit that got on her, and she's fighting everybody, and the Lord delivered her. So we just had a lot of healings taking place. And I'd bought a car for $35 that in the back of somebody, an old 51 Nash Rambler. And I'd bought this car, and the man had it out in his backyard, and it was Ambassador, and he'd get 21 miles a gallon. And this was 1956, and I bought it from him for $35, and he said the oil light's coming on, and it shakes real bad. But I just parked it out there because they didn't want to give me nothing for it. And it's been sitting out there for a good while. And so I bought it for $35 and took it down to Nash Place, and they leveled the tires up on it, fixed the oil leak, and cost me about $30. And here we had this Nash Rambler, and I went to the Sears and Roebuck and got a wagon, a David Bradley wagon, and we put this big tent on there with some chairs we had, and we left there, and we headed down through Missouri, and me and John, and we went down through Crothersville and places down there, and we'd get so many people in there, they'd break in benches down a lot of times, and the blacks and the whites and the yellows or whatever. We just having a great meeting, and the Lord healed a lot of people in mine and John's ministry back in 56 and 57 was down in there, and Brother Branham, first interview we ever had with him, he said, I see you boys had great results in your tent meetings. So this tent that we was going with now, he started in kind of repeating it. Me and John had a tent, and quite a few brothers bought it, and we had a 60 by 90, I believe it was. I don't know for sure, but we had some tent meetings back a few years before, prior to this, and we went to Phoenix, and from Phoenix we went to Tucson, and from Tucson we went down in Alabama, I believe it was, and then we went across into Kentucky, and then we went into over into West Virginia, and from West Virginia to Delaware, and from Delaware to Rockville, Illinois, and from Rockville, Illinois back out in Tri-Cities in Washington, and we had a series of meetings that we had went in this tent back a few years before, and a lot of people got a lot of deliverance. But when God began to send this tent down out, he sent it with more directions. He sent it with telling me everywhere to go. He'd tell me the name of the town to go. He'd tell me things that would happen before I would get there, and always was supernatural things. And so he began to direct the tent, and I was talking to Brother Perry Green one time about what all he was doing, and Brother Perry said, well, I believe the report, and he said, what would you want to bring the tent here? And I said, well, if you got every church in the community to sponsor it, I wouldn't come unless the Lord told me, because he told me that I was to go with this tent just where he told me. He told me not to try to expect no big crowds, but it was gleaning, and I was to go out and find different ones that he would send me to. So that's what we was doing with the tent. And so in each one of these tent services, we was having great results. And it was up in Illinois when we had a meeting there in Rochelle. Sent me back where me and my brother first started from. And he told me to go there. And that's the place where I told that testimony, I believe, of the storm already, when the storm came. And I'd preached on the watery grave. And so one night we was having someone having a prayer line, and we had people coming in the small tent, and all at once, I'd never seen 3 people come in at one time, but here 3 people come in, and it was grass, and you couldn't hear the person walking or nothing. But anyway, they had brought this woman, and she was on crutches, and they had brought a chair in there, and set her down. And the two vessels that I had there in there with me, they had their heads bowed. And when they come in and sat down, the Spirit spoke through one of them and said, I see a trio. Said, I see a man and his wife and a daughter. And said, he told me there's much talent in this family. And he said, I see one sitting. And now I knew I'd met this man, and this man was Brother Fred Hatfield's wife, his daddy. And his wife had died, and he got married again to this woman. And the daughter, she was a grown woman, she was helping her on one side, and he was on the other side, and they was helping her walk with these crutches and get in there. And that was the daughter. And I didn't know these people. I just knew him. I'd met him, and then I've assumed as his wife. So anyway, the Spirit of the Lord spoke to her, and he told me to lay that piece of clothes on her and us to pray. And when we prayed, the Lord healed her, and she jumped up from there, and she went to praising God and shouting and speaking in another language. And she went out of that there little tent there just praising God. And some started trying to catch hold of her, and she just shoved them back out of the way. And that was a real outstanding miracle. And you know, we left there, and a few years later, the Lord had sent me up there, me and Curtis, to go up there and see Ralph Callahan, and said he's about to pass away, and told me to go up there and see him. And I went up there and talked to him a good while, and he died just a short time later. And a lot of his family didn't even know he was going to die, but I did. But the Lord didn't tell me to tell him, so I didn't tell him. But anyway, he told me to go buy the piece of property up there, and for his reasons, me to go there and walk on that property. And so I told Chris, I said, I don't know why we got to go but there, because we went by a lot of places on the way up there that we'd had meetings. And we went by Peach Orchard, Arkansas. We went by Poplar Bluff, Missouri. We'd had meeting there. We'd had tent meeting at Corny. And so here's three places that we had to go by to go to Rockford, Illinois. And but my reasons, you go and walk on that property. So we went over there and walked on the property and prayed. And then Curtis looked over there at this place where that let us have it. He said, you remember they let us have this piece of property for nothing and asked us to pray that they would get that building rented out that they had. And they had a big building over there that they'd built new, and they hadn't rented out. He said, let's go over there and see what kind of business they got in there. And they had a great big place, and they had a lot of furniture, and it's kind of like a second-hand place, but it's a big place. And they had rented out. And we went over there to see what kind of property or what kind of products they had in there. And Curtis seen a woman in there. And he said, he talked to her a little bit. And he said, where are you from? She said, well, about 35 miles from here. And so he didn't tell her anything, just talking to her. And I walked around another way looking at some stuff, and here come a man walking, and I knew him. And I said, do you know who I am? And he said, no, I don't believe I do. I said, well, we're the one that come up here and had the tent meeting, and it was Brother Hatfield's wife's daddy. And that was the one. And now here the Lord sends me back up there a few years later. I don't even know how long it was, 3 or 4 years. But he sends me back up there to see this woman. And here she was in there shopping, and the Lord showed me that she is still healed. And that's what he sent me back there for, to see. So it was so many testimonies that I have of what all we did and how the places we went, and the outstanding things that taken place. I remember we went to Corning, Arkansas, we was up there, and the Lord spoke to me and told me to, I went to different churches to see if anybody would come out and help us and us find a place. And that's a place we really had a hard time finding the place. And we found a place out of town, going on 67 Highway on the other side of Corning, and we thought it'd be a really good place to put the tent. We went and seen the man, and he told us no, he would not rent it to us. Well, we couldn't find nothing, nowhere. And so we come home, and we prayed, and the Lord sent us back up there to that we would find a place. And I remember we went by and seen a couple preachers, and one of them was McMaster's. And come to find out, Brother McMaster's was pastoring the church of the group, and I don't even remember, it was kind of independent Pentecostal church, but he was pastoring the church of the group that sponsored Brother Branham in 1947, and when my mother got healed in 1947 with the cancer, that's where the group that he was pastoring was where Mother got healed in. And he come over there to the service after we found this place. We went up there and asked this guy, and he wouldn't let us have it. And somebody else told us, said, you ought to get that place up there. And Curtis told him, said, well, we done tried that, and he won't let us. He said, well, I'll tell you, he's got a girlfriend down there at Delaplane, Arkansas, and she runs a store down there, and said, go down and see her. Said, I'll bet you she'll help you get it. So we went down there, and Curtis went in and seen her, and he had come in there when we was having a meeting 5 miles from there, Peach Orchard, and he come in there and got a chain from her to chain across the, see people couldn't drive in a certain way, and she said, well, I can't attend the meeting. She said, but I'll give you this, I'll donate this chain to you for the service. I'd like to attend the meeting. Well, she was the same woman. So when Curtis went back to her, she said, well, you let me talk to him. I'll get you that place. And so she got us that place. And Brother Branham had told me when he prayed over me to go ordain me. If you'll notice on the tape, if you listen to it, and he prayed that the Lord would send me to the highways and the hedges, and used that scripture, and he didn't pray that prayer on any of the rest of them that I heard, because you can listen at it. But anyway, while we were there at Corning, the Spirit spoke in a prayer meeting one day and says, go out and look where you're setting, where your trailers are setting. And we had backed all them trailers up against all these hedges. There's a whole bunch of hedges. And every one of our trailers was backed up against them hedges. And out there was the main highway that goes from Corning to Poplar Bluff and all the way in up through north, St. Louis and up through there. Here was this highway, cars just going by the highway. And so that was one of the outstanding things that taken place. But he would send us to these different areas. And while we was at Corning, while we was at Peach Orchard, that was a meeting, we went to Corning the next meeting. But while we was there, my sister, Margaret McComas, she had told her Brother Hatfield had a church down at Walnut Ridge, and she had told Brother Hatfield, said, my brother's having tent meeting over there at Peach Orchard. And he said to her, he told me later what he said. He said, I ain't lost nothing there, and I ain't going to be going. And so she said, well, okay. I thought maybe that she'd want to go. Well, he wound up in the hospital just a few days later. And so he come over there to the tent. And when he come to the tent, he called me. When service was over, he said, I want to talk to you. And I walked out there and talked to him, and he said, I want to apologize to you. He said, I've said some things about you I didn't know nothing about, and I've made some bad statements, and I want you to forgive me. I said, oh, it's okay, brother. And he said, no, it's not okay. I want you to forgive me. And I said, well, I forgive you, brother. He said, I'll tell you what happened to me. He said, but your sister told me about coming. I made some remarks I wasn't coming, hadn't lost nothing over here. He said, I wound up in the hospital, and the Lord spoke to me and told me, now, when you get out of here, you go to that tent meeting. And so this tent meeting that we had was, the Lord had spoke to me and told me to buy this 40 by 100 tent, and he'd fill it up. And he never did fill it up but one time. And so I was at Peach Orchard, and that's where my friend come down there that I drug out of the water. And he told me when I went to Peach Orchard, he said, because I was raised in 3 Mile there, and he said, you go to Branson, Missouri, and said, there's a singer up there that you know or met. I'd met her one time, and her name was Barbara Fairchild, and she's a country singer. And so he said, you go see her, and you tell her that you come on business for the King. And the Spirit said she will come and sing for you in that meeting. Now, I told a friend of mine about it, and he said, well, she won't come and sing for you because she's raised in a Church of Christ, doesn't believe in music, and said she sings at, she won't sing in religious gatherings. I said, well, all I know is the Spirit of the Lord told me through prophecy that she would come and sing. So I went up to Branson, Missouri, and normally I wouldn't have went to this gathering because it's just a little country program she had there, and she probably had 1,000 people there, and we went over there and went in, and they sung some gospel music and mostly just country music. And so I went up to her, and she had made a #1 hit back when she was younger, and it was I Wished I Was a Teddy Bear. So she had teddy bears all in her front of her studio there. And my little daughter, Sarah, she was young at that time, and she said, I want a teddy bear. And I said, well, I'll get it for you after the show's over. It was about time to go into the show. And so they had an intermission, and in that intermission, I walked up there, and they're selling tapes, little cassettes. And I said, Barbara, I told her what my name was and told her I was a preacher. She said, well, I'm glad to have you. I said, I was born in Peach Orchard, Arkansas, 3 Mile there. She said, well, I was born in Noble, that's 5 Mile. I said, yeah, I know you was. Excuse me. I said, I know you was. Because she had come somewhere, we had a singing one time down there at Delaplane and sang down there, and I had some of the people in the church over there singing. And I said, you was over there at a certain restaurant one time. She said, yeah, I remember that. I said, well, the Lord told me to come tell you something. And she looked real funny. She said, what did he say? I said, well, she said, you see me when the service is over. Don't you leave. I said, well, I won't leave. I got something to tell you. So service, when she had her program over, she come straight to me and took me up there where her front was, where the office was. And she says, what did he tell you? I said, well, now, Barbara, I don't know what you believe. I hear that you was raised in a church where you don't believe in music. She said, oh, you haven't heard about me getting converted out of that? And I said, no, I haven't. She said, well, I got a testimony to tell you, but tell me now, what did the Lord say? I said, he told me to tell you that I come on business for the King. And she said, excuse me, she said, what does he want? I said, well, he told me that I'm going to have a meeting down at Peach Orchard, and he told me you used to come sing at one of the services. She said, well, let me know when it's going to be, because I will be there. I'll see how my schedule is. I said, no, I won't have to help God none. I said, if it's God speaking, I know it is. I said, you'll have a night off. when I have that meeting. So when I scheduled my meeting, I called her and she had a night off. And she come. And people all around there that knew her, even her daddy had never been in a religious service with her, because she got up in their church and told about her getting the Holy Ghost somewhere in a Pentecostal gathering. And she told them that, I know I was raised here, and you said you had to have the name over the door. She said, but I never was converted. And she got to crying, and the people all, she went up to the preacher and told him she had something she'd like to say, and she said, well, what do you want to say? They all of them knew her. What do you want to say, Barbara? And she said, well, I'd rather just say it one time. He said, well, you go tell the deacon. So she went to the deacon, and the deacon said, she went to the him, and so then the deacon said the same thing. So what are you going to say, Barbara? She said, I'd just like to say it one time. I don't want to. So he got up, and the preacher said, Barbara's got something she's wanting to say to this church, and they kind of thought she was going to make confession, I guess. But anyway, because she'd had kind of a rough life, been married 2 or 3 times, but you know, that's who God goes out after a lot of times, rejects. We don't know why that it's that way, but that's the way it was. So anyway, they come to the meeting and sang, and I had her sitting on the rostrum until she's ready, and had her give a testimony. And so there's some of the people that come to the meeting that criticized me having her there. But there was people that come all over that was friends of hers, and they filled the tent up. Lord told me he'd fill it up, and they did. It's about 500. And they filled up the tent, and she told me, she cried. She told me, said, if I'm ever around close to where you are, and you having a tent meeting, she said, let me know, because I'll come to it and sing if you want me to. And she told somebody else that here a while back. They seen her, and she was telling them how she enjoyed that. But you know, the Lord told me to give her a book, A Man Sent from God. I had some people that I knew, and they come around trying to give her some doctrinal tapes. And, you know, somebody said, well, it don't matter who, if you're predestinated, you're going to believe it. Well, that ain't what Brother Branham taught. He taught if you want to testify to somebody, you give them how the angel came to me, or a man sent from God, or something. And that's the way. And we see a lot of these people that started following the message and really went after it. All doctrinated, and they got so doctrinated they went off teaching all kind of stuff. And there's more hindrance to the message in people that claims to believe the message, because they have divided, separated. And Brother Branham said that the Pentecostal group can never take this church to a rapture, because they're too much at one another's throat. And I'm going to say a statement right here, that the so-called followers of Brother Branham is so much at one another's throats, they'll never take this church to a rapture. You're going to have to come out of all your systems and all your organized groups and become a love of God, get the love of God in your heart, and you leave all that up to God. You don't know who God's going to give salvation to, and you don't know who He's going to save, and you don't know whether or not the educated ones that know so much about the message. Let me tell you, them Pharisees and them knew so much about Moses' message, and they said, we got Moses. He said, if you had known Moses, you'd known me, and if you really knowed Brother Branham, you'd know that this work is of God that he sent out, because he proved it and vindicated it. And it doesn't make no difference about anybody's faults and failures, and I've got a lot of them. And I don't claim that I'm perfect, but I know one thing. I know He who is perfect. And therefore, God's got to tear down the walls and got to get people filled with the love of God, or there ain't nobody going to go with hatred and bitterness and fault-finding and ridicule and always running around. Some brother told me one time, said, you know, called you brother. He said, Brother Earl. I still call you brother. He said, a lot of people don't even think I ought to call you brother. I said, well, it just goes to show how ignorant they are. Paul one time called people brother, smote him in the face. He said, God will smack you, you whited wall, command me to be smitten, judged by the law, and then command me to be smitten contrary. They said, revilest thou God's high priest? He said, I didn't know that was God's high priest. He said, because it is written, thou shalt not speak evil of the ruler of the people. So the word corrected the error in Paul, and it'll correct the error in us if we'll let it correct the error in us. So we're just thankful to be able to give some of these testimonies, and we got some more that we're going to be giving, and from time to time, and then we're going to put these on the internet or wherever the Lord leads for us to do that. So God bless you.